Hi everyone, my name is Martin Scholz. I'm glad that you're here and that you're interested in the session and yes, that you joined this session today. So I'm the founder and managing director of Birdhub Ventures, a venture builder in Frankfurt. And when Cem, the founder of the Startupnight, asked me some time ago if I would like to speak today on the topic of open innovation, I didn't think twice. So today I want to share my experience out from 8 years as a project manager in a corporation and those as of a founder today. So I founded my own company 2 years before. So this is a venture builder in Frankfurt. If you have any question on this, we can address those questions after the session. A little side note on this session. So the session will be recorded, so you'll have the chance to share it with friends afterwards if you like to. And if you want the presentation, of course, just drop me a message on LinkedIn and I'll send you all the slides. And if you have any questions during the sessions, feel free to ask those questions in the chat and I'll answer those questions at the end of the session. So that's it from this point. Let's start and dive into the topic. As you can see, the main question for the session today is, why do corporations need to open up? The simple answer is all corporations are part of the environment that influences them. Therefore, companies are already influenced from outside, whether they want it or not. Open innovation is about recognizing these influences and using them for your own growth. Maybe you have already heard about VUCA. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It describes the situation of constant and unpredictable change. So there are many external reasons for constant and unpredictable change that puts pressure on the corporation, like you can see in the headline. So the most important factors are the changing customer behavior that leads to a change in demand, the new technologies that enable new products, services, and business models, the cross-industry competitors that enter the home turfs. And so when I was working in my previous career in a large corporation, so it was not the direct competitors, it was the new entrants in this industry who are the heaviest competitors right now. Then, of course, I'm sure you have already heard about the scale-ups, the hyper-growth startups that chase the big players. And of course, the last part is the constantly new knowledge that requires a lifelong learning. So the question is, what happens when a company only looks internally and does not consider the environment or include it in the innovation process? So basically, what you can see on this picture is a tanker. This is often the used metaphor of a large corporation, and this tanker is in a really, really bad situation. So please now make a guess and post in the chat which development curves of which companies could be drawn here. So maybe you can put it in the chat. I'll have a look in the chat. So if you're not coming up with some guesses, so basically this could be quite a few companies. For example, this could be the curves of sold mobile phones of Nokia and Apple. This could be Kodak and Fujifilm in the field of digital photography, or it could be the e-reader business of Barnes & Noble, Sony, Samsung, whoever, and Amazon. Or at least, let's hope it's not the case, but this could also be the curves of the traditional car manufacturers like BMW, Daimler, Volkswagen, and new entrants like Tesla in the field of electric vehicles. So basically, this graph shows a company that goes bankrupt and a company that skyrockets. Why is this the case? So this is the development curve of Blockbuster and Netflix. Yeah, you can see Blockbuster was a large player in the field once Netflix entered the field of DVDs and movie rental services. So Blockbuster was by 2000 the largest American provider of home movie and rental services. It was founded in 1985, and at its peak, it already had 9,000 stores and employed about 84,000 people. So it was a really huge corporation. Netflix was founded years after that, as a mail order service, so in the same field as Blockbuster. And yes, it started later in 2007 with a more convenient service. So it launched the streaming services via the internet, and it left the field of sending DVDs forth and back from mortal and retail stores over to Blockbuster, which stayed in this field because of the size and because of the organizational structure. So Blockbuster didn't move away, as already mentioned, and therefore, because of the significant loss of revenue in the 2000s, the company filed for bankruptcy in 2010. In 2020, so last year, Netflix already had a 200 million subscribers and already a turnover of 25 billion US dollar. So it is already 5 times the turnover of Blockbuster, which had it at its peak. So the question is, how did Netflix manage to skyrocket, and what happened to Blockbuster that they went bankrupt in 2010? Of course, in the same market. Yes, pretty sure. I have no all-inclusive explanation, as the cost situation has pushed Blockbuster really much into one corner. Nevertheless, they should have looked more at the external factors, which were obvious at this point. So now, which are these external factors, and what are thus the key challenges to remain competitive in the field of open innovation? So you have to prevent your customers from perceiving you as being detached from their needs. That means Netflix launched a really convenient service, so people didn't have to leave the home to watch a movie. So you have to ward off the potential stagnation of your company's products and services. So if you see that users are not using your products anymore, or so that it's declining, look into other fields and ask your customers why they're doing so. Third point is avoid the false conclusions which arise from the biased or improper market research. So I'm pretty sure that the strategy department of Blockbuster had something different in mind when they thought about the future of Blockbuster. And the last and most important part is overcome the disruption that results from being out of touch with the global market trends. So Netflix was such a huge success because the new technology came up and Netflix used it in the way which was the best way to use the streaming services. So now I want to go into the case of Blockbuster and Netflix, and that there are different ways to respond to external factors. One was successful in its innovation strategy and the other was not. So let me make a little excursus about innovation types and innovations, as Clayton Christensen, the professor at Harvard and the author of the famous book, The Innovator's Dilemma, he distinguished 3 main types of innovation. So the first one, as you can see on the left, is the sustaining innovation. So this is an innovation which is more or less a performance improvement for the most attractive customers in the mainstream market. So this is what Blockbuster was heading for. Then there is, of course, the low-end disruption, which is basically a new operating or financial approach which returns or discount prices. So to say, make it cheaper than others do in the same market. And the third one, which is in the end the real disruptive model, is the new market disruptive innovation, which has improved performance in new attributes. That means like simplicity or convenience for your customers. So now I have 4 comments on the types of innovation and the relation to open innovation, the topic of today, this session today. So new technology is not by itself disruptive. It depends on how it is deployed on the market and how it is relative to the business model or the existing products or services. That means Blockbuster tried to go into on-demand services, but they had a big organization which was not suitable to follow this path into the new way of video streaming services. Then the second one is start your innovation today. Even while your core business is still strong, disruption is typically an opportunity long before it is a threat. So that means start today and make a bold move. The third one is spot the disruption in your industry early by studying your customers who stopped using your product or service. That means ask your customers, observe your customers, so they will give you the input you need for your further strategy. And the fourth point is that an organization cannot disrupt itself. That means disruptive business models must be separated from the core business. So Blockbuster has, as already mentioned, focused on the sustaining innovations. The question now is whether it would have made any difference if they had concentrated completely on new market disruptions like video streaming with the existing organization. So I want to put this question on hold and answer it later when I come to the optimal strategy for open innovation. So on this page, I want to discuss the three phases of a transformation that are necessary for open innovation. How to become an open innovator. The first phase is necessary to get the critical masses for the transformation. So here we start with a small organization and try to find out what works and what doesn't in your company. We involve a small number of senior managers from different areas. So these champions are necessary to approve exceptions from the innovation approaches. So this is really necessary to get the input and to get the allowance of your managers for this. And additionally, the top management defines the criteria for the success. So this is for the top management essential. In the second phase, we build up an organizational momentum to get the necessary support for the delicate moments in the innovation process, which will for sure come. So we increase the number of people involved and train all senior leaders. Here we introduce appropriate methods and tools with coaches, for example, innovation boards or growth boards. And last but not least, in the third phase, we establish the in-depth systems for teams and projects of all kinds. Means we establish KPIs to allocate the necessary resources to change, and we tackle the most difficult systems and processes, such as compensation, promotion, resource allocation, and legal. So the third phase is very important as it gives an organization the necessary flexibility for continuous transformation. And that's also an important message of the session now, that it's the continuous transformation which is necessary for an innovation company. So on this slide, I've now shown different archetypes of innovation approaches. In my years as a digital transformation consultant and venture builder, I've observed 10 archetypes that help to initiate the transformation. So for this, it is important to note that one type does not fit every company and every task. So therefore, one needs to be aware of the company's goals and challenges before experimenting with these archetypes. It is also important never to try just one type, but to test different approaches so that at a given point in time, you have enough experience to commit for a period of time to use your resources efficiently. In this graph, I have roughly illustrated the classification of the archetypes and the relationship between external involvement and investment level. So let's dive into the different fields. So as every company should have, it's the research and development department. So this is the basis, this is the baseline of innovation in every company. Some companies or most companies are already starting with innovation outposts, which means a scouting mission, for example, in Tel Aviv or in San Francisco or also in Berlin, where they send managers, where they open departments to get into the community. The second one is the internal view. That means that we leverage the internal entrepreneur of companies and corporations to add value to the innovation process, the entrepreneurship programs and the corporate innovation labs. Then that's the field where I am in. It's the venture building field, where we can distinguish three models: the corporate venture builder, the startup studio, and the external venture builder. So the venture builder is more focusing on building businesses for existing business units, and the startup studio is more focusing on building startups for an exit in later stages. Then we can also say there's the field where we come in contact, in touch with students and many startups, like at hackathons, startup pitches, challenge prizes, employee jurors, or mentoring, for example. And then we can also distinguish between incubators and accelerators. And there, for example, one of the partners for the session today, for this whole event today, Hubraum, is in this field. There we are talking about the accelerators. And the last part, which is then the last development, I would say, in this field of archetypes, is the corporate venture capital, where you invest money in external startups to get their knowledge, or at least to make investments in such startups, which could be a strategic or financial view of investments. And the M&A, the mergers and acquisitions, and there's also the fancy new word acquihire, where we acquire a team to get this stuff or this team on board in a corporation to start with the innovation together with them afterwards. So this is already the last slide, and I would now like to return to the question of whether Blockbuster would have survived if it had adopted a completely new approach to innovation. The answer is most likely it depends. Whether management would have completely turned the tide and thus overwhelmed the organization, or whether management would have paved the way to further innovation approaches. So there are two simultaneous but fundamentally different strategy development processes: the deliberate strategy development process and the emergent strategy process. So the first one, the delivery strategy, is a conscious and thoughtful organized action. It's generated from rigorous analysis on data, market growth, segment size, competitors, strengths and weaknesses, and so on. Once a corporation has found a profitable strategy and this strategy is clear, it must become the deliberate strategy. Because in those circumstances, it's really necessary that the execution is really effective, because this is always the difference between the success and the failure, the execution of a strategy. And on the second side, in the bottom, we have the emergent strategy. This is the strategy for the unplanned actions from initiatives that bubble up, for example, from those innovation approaches I've just listed within the organization. The product of spontaneous innovation and day-to-day prioritization and investment decisions made by the middle managers, engineers, salespeople, staff from the middle segment of the corporation. So this strategy is good when the future is hard to read and it's not clear what the right strategy should be. So it's good to experiment, typically in the early phases of a company or when the competitive landscape is changing. This should have been the case in the case of Blockbuster. For this strategy, you have to ensure that the employees are empowered to surface the new ideas. So in the end, there are three key takeaways for the optimal strategy and for open innovation for this session with the long-term success. So first, never regard your strategy as the right strategy. So if you're successful, this is just a few of the moment, then it's just the temporarily good strategy. The second, every company needs a deliberate strategy and an emergent strategy. Both is needed and essential for the company, because this takes the external influence into account and makes new ways of disruptive growth discoverable. The third one, the type of the funding a new initiatives receive can greatly influence its success. That means good money, for example, is good for the early stages of a business. Good money means that it's patient and will allow the company to find the profitable strategy, the deliberate strategy. And once the winning strategy, the profitable strategy is discovered, good money will push the company to grow it quickly. So both ways are necessary for open innovation, and both strategies help to be innovative long term. In the end, so here in this session, I've now used some good insights from books that really inspired me in my career, and I want to recommend to you in the end. So the first one, I'm pretty sure you know it. It's all-time classic. It's the Blue Ocean Strategy, where it is discussed how to find the right innovation spots in fields where there's a really big battle on innovation. Then the second one is the innovation dilemma, the innovator's dilemma from Clayton Christensen, as stated. He's describing how disruptive innovation takes place in corporations and how you should then go with disruptive innovations or use it outside of the corporation in a separate business, for example. And the third one, that's the startup way. There, Eric Rice describes how the startup spirit can be put in a corporation and how you make employees to entrepreneurs. So basically, those are the books that inspired me a lot, and I hope you really enjoyed the session. So now I'm open for discussion. So please ask me anything you want in the chat. And for today, I want to thank you for the participation. And I'm now really curious to hear what you want to discuss now.